Holy Communion, also known as the Lord's Supper, the Eucharist, or the Mass. Just as family and friends share meals to strengthen their bonds of affection, so God's people gather around the Lord's table to strengthen their bonds of affection with the Lord and with one another. In the early church, Christ followers shared Holy Communion each Sunday. By the Middle Ages, before the Reformation, the people rarely received Holy Communion, typically only once a year. Many thought the Mass had magical powers, even the ability to free their loved ones from purgatory to get into heaven. Though they rarely received the Lord's Supper, they regularly observed the priest celebrating communion. The high point of the celebration was when the priest raised the bread and said in Latin, "Hoc est corpus meum," which means, "This is my body." They thought that was the magic moment. Over the years, the phrase "Hoc est corpus meum" became hocus pocus. Many had a superstitious, unbiblical view of Holy Communion. The great reformers, Martin Luther and John Calvin, both advocated weekly Holy Communion, desiring to restore what the early church and the church fathers so warmly embraced. In the Anglican Church today, we have returned to the historical and biblical practice of receiving Holy Communion each week. In Luke chapter 22, Jesus commanded us to regularly receive his body and blood through the bread and wine of Holy Communion. As we receive his body and blood, Jesus told us to do this in remembrance of me. Though the Holy Communion is a meal of remembrance, much like the Passover meal, it is much more. In John chapter 6, Jesus said, "Whoever feeds on my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life." Now this is a bit of a mystery. How do I receive his body through the bread? How do I receive his blood through the wine? By faith, we accept that the real presence of Christ is in the Lord's Supper. We receive Holy Communion each Sunday because it's biblical, it was the early church norm, and Christ meets us with his real presence through it. In the Anglican Church, all baptized Christians, members or guests, are welcome to receive Holy Communion.